Elizabeth, it's 2002. You're at St. Joseph's University studying economics and finance. Did you ever think that you'd own Very Real Estate today?
No, I had no idea in 2002 what I would be when I grow up.
What was the driving force to go to St. Joseph's University and study business? It was like a business curriculum that you were focused in, correct?
Yes. So
finance, economics.
Yep. So I graduated high school in 2001, and I was looking at colleges. I think it's a really hard thing when you're 18 years old to set a career path. I think we put a lot of pressure on young people to say, okay, you're going to study this and you're going to be this person when you grow up. Because you're 18, you're still trying to figure out. I mean, I didn't figure out who I was until I was probably 30. So I was 18. I was planning to go to college. I knew that I wanted to study business. I had always had kind of an interest in it, I guess. And I went to St. Joe's because I wanted to stay kind of locally, but I wanted to live on campus. My dad went to St. Joe's. I really liked being there. My cousin, Kate, was 2 years older than me, also at St. Joe's. That's why I chose St. Joe's. And I studied finance because I was good at math and I hated accounting. So there was no science behind how I got into finance, but that's how I headed down that career path.
Now, when you were in school, were there any other extracurriculars that like almost deviated you from that focus path of like, I'm going to focus on math, I'm going to focus on this, or where it was your head down and you were focused in that curriculum, like in what your skill sets were? So like
I got into real estate because everybody told us all the time, they really drilled it into you at St. Joe's. It's all about internships and internships and internships to help you get a full-time job. Huh. And so I graduated college in 2005. The economy was so good in 2005, especially for a finance major, because, you could do anything. There was anything that you could do with a degree like that. And I remember distinctly, I was sitting in a management class at the time. It was the spring semester before my junior year. And the professor at the time says, you know what, I know a lot of you are stressed out about getting an internship this summer because it was critical. St. Joe's said you have to have this internship your summer between junior and senior year, which will launch you into a full-time job.
Like if you don't have it,
you're kind of in trouble. And so it was the spring semester, so it was probably, March time frame. I still didn't have an internship. I had no idea. So this professor says, and it was great advice, she said, well, take something that you like, couple it with your degree, and get a job in that field. So I was studying finance, as I mentioned. I always liked real estate. I grew up in New Jersey, in South Jersey. My parents still live in my childhood home.
Wow.
But I think my mom always wanted to move. So she would pack my younger brother, Kevin, and my dad and I up on Sundays, and we would go to open houses. And I remember being 10 years old, and I knew how to read a floor plan. And really? I loved it. I loved the marketing materials. I loved real estate. And so I quite literally did what this professor said. It was 2004 at the time. I Googled finance, real estate, and Philadelphia because I was living in Manayunk and I wanted to kind of stay in the area. And that's how I ended up in real estate. I got an internship in commercial real estate.
So the internship that you got, was that at Duffy and Phelps?
So it was with a company at the time that was called Legg Mason Real Estate Services.
Okay.
Legg Mason Real Estate Services was based out of Baltimore. They had a Philadelphia office. I sent a general inquiry on their website saying, hey, do you take summer interns? And this was 2004, so there wasn't, it wasn't the internet like it is today, and these very sophisticated ways in which, you write to a company and then you have like 10 layers of people who write back to you. The CEO, the president of the company, wrote back to me.
Wow.
The general inquiries must have gone into his inbox. And he said, hey, Elizabeth, we've had interns in the past. Do you want to come in and interview? So I did. I went in for an interview. I got the job as a summer intern. It was a great internship because I figured out what I didn't like. So I spent a month in property accounting, which of course I hated because, I didn't like accounting. I spent a month in asset management, and I thought it was interesting. And then I did the last month of August of the internship was in acquisitions. And I realized I loved the investment side of the business. I liked putting people together.
Like in the sense of, so there's the accounting part, which is numbers only, and then there's all the moving parts that come together to actually acquire an asset that is producing some kind of value, not taking away value. And that's what drew you into like the analyst thought pattern?
Exactly. And so I loved that side of the business, and Legg Mason offered me a job. So it worked. The St. Joe's professor was correct. Get a good internship and you'll probably get a full-time job. But at this time, I was 21 years old. I was an absolute brat. I mean, because you're 21, what the heck do you know about yourself, right?
Yeah.
At least I didn't know anything. And they offered me, Legg Mason's path was, we'll hire you as an analyst for your asset management division, and then we'll promote you 2 years later into acquisitions. Because acquisitions was really fast-paced. We were investing money in commercial real estate. A deal would come in, you'd have to be able to very quickly, analytically say, this is cash flowing correctly, this is exactly what's right for our investor. And they just didn't want to train someone. They didn't have time to train someone in that fast-paced environment. And so I said, I don't know. I think I'm just going to interview on campus. I'm not really sure that I want to take this position. So I didn't. So I ended up, I of course, closed that door, but gently, and kept the relationship going. And I ended up taking a position in commercial real estate appraisal with Duff & Phelps right out of college. Yeah.
Would you say that the moving into that direction, in hindsight, what was the biggest lesson that you could have learned, I guess, from that?
Yeah. So I had a mentor at the time, and I think this is the foundation for me and why I believe so strongly in mentorship, because I've been so fortunate to have amazing mentors over my career. So I mentor many people as a result of that, because I think it all comes full circle. So I had a mentor at the time who said, look, you want to be in acquisitions, right? You want to be on the transaction, the investment side of the business, but you can't do anything in real estate unless you know what it's worth. Go work in commercial real estate appraisal. And Jay, I had no idea what that was. Wow. I mean, I was 21. I had no idea. But on campus, they were doing interviews. Duff & Phelps, which was previously Standard & Poor's at the time that I worked there, they were interviewing on campus for commercial real estate appraisal. So I went on the interview, learned a little bit more about what they did, and then I took the position. And I thought, this is a great foundation in real estate. And it absolutely was. To see a little bit of a lot of things, working in consulting. And my glamorous start in real estate was appraising gas stations for Shell Oil.
Wow. And now for people that don't understand appraising in that language, you're looking for what the value of something is?
Exactly.
Is that kind of the layman interpretation that I'm attempting to...
No, you nail on the head. And I was the only woman on my team. I was in the Philadelphia office. I was the only woman on my team. I was the most junior one, so I got all the jobs that the guys didn't want. And so who wants to appraise gas stations in July, right? I was traveling all over the country with a rolling wheel. Do you know what that is?
No, what's a rolling wheel?
So it's a tape measure on a stick.
Okay.
And we were doing a cost approach. So basically we had to say, okay, gas station in Omaha, Nebraska, let's say, how much would it cost to rebuild this? So we had to take measurements of the canopy. So I took the rolling wheel and rolled it out. And I learned pretty quickly that you don't have to get dressed up to do that job. It was so embarrassing because here I am right out of St. Joe's. You put on a suit, you go to work, right? So here I am appraising gas stations in all over the country. And I was dressed probably similar to the way I am now. And people were like, who is this person? What are they doing?
Now, a lot of people may have, said, forget this, I'm going to give up. What, if in the culture, your environment, you're the only one that's now going to be in the position to have to do this. What was it? A specific character trait, something in the back of your mind that kept you going and just doing it? Because you ended up crushing an acquisition in New York, and I want to get into that. Hundreds of millions of dollars on projects that you ended up doing, but you had to. It seems like you had to go through that first.
Yeah, you did.
So what kept you going?
So I do remember distinctly, I graduated from St. Joe's in May. I started at which is now Duff & Phelps, in June. My first assignment was appraising gas stations. And I remember distinctly being in a rental car, driving to the next gas station. And I thought, why'd you go to college for this? What am I doing with my life? But then I thought, okay, well, I'm not obviously going to quit my first job immediately. Let me give this some time. So I started to prove myself, and I liked it. I thought it was really fascinating to have the opportunity as a young person to have, your expenses paid. I was staying in hotels. I was traveling. I was all over the place. I've now, at age 35, I've been to 47 states in the U.S., and a lot of it was out of this first job. So I thought, okay, let me see the silver lining in appraising gas stations.
So the silver lining.
Yeah, that's what pushed me. And then from the gas stations, I moved up to appraising fast food restaurants. Also all over the South. I was all over the South appraising Burger Kings and Wendy's. And At the time, we had to eat at each restaurant because you had to take a discrete picture. I think I gained 10 pounds. And I would never eat fast food again as a result. But
that's maybe a blessing.
Maybe
in many disguises.
that's the silver lining.
Yeah.
But so from that, by the time I left Duff & Phelps, it was 15 months from the time I was hired to the time that I left. My first assignment was appraising gas stations. My last assignment was appraising Paradise Island in the Bahamas, the Atlantis. And that was because I put my head down and I just did what people asked me to do, and I learned a lot along the way. And I never felt, and as I mentioned, I mentor a lot of people, and I always tell them, you're not above anything. Just because you have a degree from a great university and you're really smart and you're very successful, you're not above anything. Try everything.
Wow.
Put your head down and see, because in a 15-month period to go from there to there was a huge experience. And I didn't know that at the time.
And you're 22, 23?
I was 23 at the time.
You're 23.
Yeah, so, and I spent a week at the Atlantis.
Wow.
Figuring out what the value of that resort was.
Dozens of states that you got to travel. Would you say that
I went to Europe, I went to the Caribbean. Wow. Yeah.
With all of those experiences today, in hindsight, could that add value to the relationships that you have now in your business?
Absolutely, without question. And it's funny, when you're in your career path, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what path you're on. I never knew where I was going to go, but I was never afraid to take on a challenge. I was never afraid to say, okay, I don't really know how to appraise a gas station, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to ask my boss. I'm going to get some guidance along the way, and then you do it. So after 15 months, I was recruited back to where I had interned, which was, and that's now Grosvenor.
And how do you say that? It was a different company? What were
so
they
it was
called?
Legg Mason Real Estate Services when I interned with them in 2004. This was now 2006. They had been acquired. That division of Legg Mason was acquired by a London-based firm called Grosvenor, which is actually the largest property company in the world, or the oldest property company in the world. It's a 300-year-old property company.
300 years. That's a cultural
crazy history.
Case study, is it?
So it's a 300-year-old property company that was started with a dowry of the lands of Mayfair and Belgravia, which, if you know London at all, those are the two highest priced pieces of real estate probably in the world. They're way up there. And the U.S. Embassy in London actually sits on Grosvenor's land. So Grosvenor is a real person. He just passed away 2 years ago. He was the Duke of Westminster. And so he was actually the godfather of Prince William. Crazy property.
The godfather of
Prince
William.
Crazy history. Mm-hmm.
And did he acquire this other, it was a different name?
He acquired Legg Mason Real Estate Services because they wanted to expand their U.S. platform.
And that came back from a dowry on like this crazy
300
land.
years previously, it was
But
swamp
this is
land.
where you interned, that it wasn't the offer that you wanted, so you made a decision to go somewhere else. And do you feel like that year and a half, when you ended up facing some fear or facing whatever obstacles, did that prepare you better? Do you think you were better off to go later there?
Absolutely, because their path was, Legg Mason's path, which became ultimately Grosvenor, was 2 years in one division and then you'll be promoted into acquisitions. I spent 15 months at a different company and then took the job in acquisitions.
The universe works in funny ways.
I love the universe.
It's the purple. Well, we'll get into that.
I find that, yes, wherever you're meant to be, you're going to find a way to be there. So I moved back. I took the job. And it was so funny because, again, you're so silly. Like, I was so silly at the time. I'm 23 years old. And I was starting to be recruited by a managing director who was previously Legg Mason, now Grosvenor. She kept saying, I need an analyst. Do you want to come back and work for me? And I said, no, I don't. I'm pretty happy where I am. And I always in my mind thought you should be in your first position. Probably St. Joe's told us this.
Yeah.
You should be in your first position for 2 years. And it had only been 15 months. So I thought, I should probably stick it out. And I'm very close with my dad. He's been extremely influential in helping me build this business. With Very, but at the time I said, Dad, I don't know, what do you think I should do? They're coming after me. He said, Elizabeth, this is the job you wanted a year and a half ago. Go after it. What's wrong with you? You don't have to stay 2 years in your first job. So I did.
So you went, and you're now a senior analyst. And you're what was the difference between the first path and when you overcame that in the second?
Yeah. So as a senior analyst, when I took this position, I reported directly to a managing director, this woman, Kathleen, who is a mentor and dear friend of mine now. I reported directly to her. And if you think about the hierarchy of a company, a managing director is way up here.
Yeah.
And a senior analyst is way down here. So there were a ton of levels in between us. But she trained me, and I of course, didn't know it at the time, but she trained me in such a way that anything that she didn't want to do when we were working on these deals, she had the confidence in me to step up to it. And she gave me that freedom to step up to it. And I remember this one time we were on a conference call. She was supposed to be on the call too. It was with attorneys. We were negotiating because we were working commercial real estate, just to back up.
In New York?
I was in Philadelphia still.
Oh, you were
with
living
Grosvenor.
in Philly. Okay.
The company was here. They're London-based, but the office was here in Philadelphia. We were acquiring real estate throughout the U.S. on behalf of our clients. And so this one particular deal, we were partnering with a developer in New York City. We were the money. Grosvenor was the money, and the developer was, heading the project. We were going to be building an apartment building in Brooklyn. Wow. And we're on a conference call. So it's us, the developer, our attorneys, and the developer's attorneys, right? So we were negotiating an agreement. We get on the call. Kathleen is supposed to be on the call. I'm in my little cubicle. She's in her big corner office. She doesn't dial into the conference call. And I'm thinking, okay, I know she's in her office. Why isn't she dialing into the call? So it was trial by fire. And I found this out later. So we have to go forward with the call. We've got all these attorneys and they're billing hourly. So we start negotiating, and we're negotiating over a document. And thankfully, the attorney who was representing Grosvenor knew me and knew I was more junior, so she helped to take the lead on it, but really. So the call's over. It's about an hour long. I stomped down the hallway to Kathleen's corner office, and I said, "You've been here the whole time, and you didn't dial into that call?" And she said, "Well, you figured it out, didn't you?" And I was shocked by that. And she gave me a piece of advice that I now give to my team all the time. And she said, "We're buying real estate. We're not saving lives. Any mistake you make, we can fix. And may you always have that perspective." And I thought, whoa, that is really fascinating. And that was a pivotal career moment for me.
Would you say, did that let go of some of the angst that we can bring into business, that just stops us? Or what were some of the lessons?
I think so. It gave me a level of confidence that I didn't previously have, that she believed in me. And of course, you believe in yourself, but to have the validation of your boss to say, "I'm going to throw you into that pool, and damn it, you better swim." And that was it. And I swam, and I thought, okay, I can do this. I can do this. She has the confidence in me, and she's going to propel me forward, and I'm going to let her propel me forward, and I'm going to be grateful for that, and I'm going to learn everything I can from her.
What are some of the characteristics that you look for in agents now in very real estate that could potentially be what she may have seen in you to give you the confidence as a leader to let them shine?
For sure. I mean, I think in residential real estate, each person is responsible for building their own book of business. And I think that, and you know this, having interviewed so many brokers and agents along the way, that it doesn't matter what name is on your business card, whether it's Very Real Estate or one of the other brokerage shops. Your client is buying you, right?
Yeah.
So I look, when I'm interviewing people, to find someone who has that deep understanding and curiosity. And understanding, I mean, for anticipating people's needs. You're working in residential real estate. You have to know and be able to listen to other people and say, okay, well, you are looking for a home, let's say for an example, and let me be the expert for you and let me show you the professionalism that you deserve being a consumer. So I look for professionalism, number one, in the agents. But I also look for curiosity. Are they wanting to learn? I always had this need to learn more, and I still do. Constantly challenging myself to the next level. And I always look for that in agents for the team.
Wow, so someone that's curious, that's something that you see as like a secret sauce.
I think so.
And does that translate to the client in a positive way, or what does that look like?
I do believe that. I mean, one of our core values here is, we share knowledge at every opportunity. And it is something that we take very seriously, is the education component around buying a home.
Wow.
And so for me, it's like if my agents have no interest in learning that next step, they have no interest in taking on that next challenge, how are they ever going to be an advocate for their clients who don't know as much? And obviously that's why they're hiring a realtor. They don't know as much about the process.
So the agent thinking, having the belief system to share as much as possible, they have to learn as much as possible first. And if they're not curious, they may not do that. And I think
that all feeds back into integrity and transparency and all of the things that are so important in a fiduciary relationship with a client.
Did some of this understanding you picked up along the way, was it also, or was it ingrained when you went to Cornell? You were the president of your class in a hospitality.
Yep, hospitality and real estate finance. Yep.
Yeah, how did that play out? And maybe my first question, because I'm excited. Yeah, there's so many questions.
We're going in a lot of directions.
That understanding of curiosity and how important it is to learn, was that reaffirmed in your training at Cornell? Or was it already there, or did it come there first?
It's interesting you should ask that, because here I am working at Grosvenor, and I had been there for, at this point, I guess about 4 years before I went to grad school. And I never felt in my career that I needed advanced education. I think that I would have been absolutely fine with a finance degree from St. Joe's. I think that that's a great foundation. But I wanted to get a master's degree because, again, I was curious about learning more. And I always thought, and I still do, and I've had the opportunity to do this recently in my career, which is so cool. I always thought that I would become a professor one day.
Wow.
I always wanted to teach. I still do.
What would you teach?
I think I would probably teach real estate or entrepreneurship, or probably a combination of the two. I lecture on both subjects at St. Joe's, as a guest speaker in the classrooms, and I love it. I find it to be so great. So of course I did research. In order to become a professor, you have to have a minimum of a master's degree. So I thought, okay, well, I'll get a master's degree because I'm curious to learn more. And the reason that I chose hospitality versus a traditional MBA was that I told you my first job out of college, I traveled all the time. Yeah. And there were periods, and even when I was working at Grosvenor in acquisitions, there were periods where I would spend a week, a month living in a hotel. And I found that industry to be so interesting. The job in hospitality is to make people happy. And there was something about that resonated with me.
Yeah, because after all those years and successfully putting together deals and acquisition, and you're putting on, presentations to raise money and all the time. Was that a big leap, or just a total? Where did that come from to get into hospitality?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So here I am at Grosvenor, and the market had really changed in 2008. Obviously, the crash happened. We had acquired about $1 billion worth of commercial real estate assets from the time I started with them at age 23 until the market fell apart. I was 25 at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was like a 2-year period. And then the music stopped, so to speak, and I became an asset manager of all that $1 billion worth of real estate that we had no idea what it was worth. And so here I am working out deals. That's when I really learned how to negotiate, because we would negotiate with banks. We got a corporate mandate from Grosvenor at the time, and they said, you can't give back any assets. Figure it out. So I was doing workouts for 2 years, right? I was trying to preserve our company's position financially. Wow. And I just got tired of it. I mean, again, I told you I was a brat. I still was at this time. I was 26. And I thought, I'm going to go back to grad school because I'm kind of tired of fighting with people all day long about
it seems extremely strenuous to have to negotiate. Stressful. So like for people that may not, and I'm a layman in this regard, but just to follow, whenever the world is crumbling around, at the end of the day, people have to keep it moving somehow. And how do they do that? If the bank has nothing and they're trying to get what they got back, then you have to convince them to let you keep it, and then it's got to somehow cash flow and make money so the books are right. Or like, there's a lot of moving parts.
There were so many moving parts.
I couldn't imagine, like residential real estate, I think, and this is me, not saying this, not you, you'd be able to help your clients now more easier that you dealt with all that. Because it's such a different fire.
It's a different
Seems like that's
fire.
a firestorm.
Yes. Look, at the end of the day, whether you are selling a $500,000 house in Center City somewhere, or you're negotiating a $100 million deal in New York City, I've done both in my career. What's consistent across both?
People.
The way you treat people.
Huh.
right?
The way you treat them and their agents.
The way you treat them, your integrity throughout the process, your transparency throughout the process. And so I have all this wonderful experience in these $10 million plus assets, but I still take all of that and apply it to my $500,000 clients or my $1 million clients or my $150,000 clients. It doesn't matter. It's the way that you treat people. It's the way that you apply your knowledge and you share your knowledge so that at the end of the day, both transactions, every party feels that they've come to the table and that they feel with confidence that they've made the right purchase or the right sale.
So, like, create a win-win no matter what.
Yeah, it's the way to do it. And that's what I've learned. I mean, I learned a lot of that over my career, is that here you are negotiating with these banks. The banks had to feel that they were getting the right return, too. I mean, you couldn't just take. And I think, you certainly could take, but eventually that's going to come back around. You talk about the universe. I truly believe what you put out there comes back to you, and it comes back to you tenfold. And so I've always, throughout my career, put out the best that I could be. And I, fortunately, have had the best come back at me. So
We see that in Philadelphia. Okay, so the
market's crazy. So you would ask me about grad school. We didn't even get there.
But I'm like, the's a lot. There's so much experience,
this poor video,
and you've done so much.
You're going to have to slice it all together, right?
Yeah, amazing. So you're in grad school, and was it the thoughts of of growing up and being in those open houses that led you think residential real estate, starting a real estate company, or how did that pan out?
No, crazily. So I'm in grad school. I picked Cornell because I wanted to study hospitality, and they're the best school in the world for hospitality. And so I applied to one graduate school, and I applied early decision. So I applied in October. I found out right before Christmas that I had gotten in, and I thought, okay, if I don't get in, my backup plan is I'll apply to all the other very good grad schools.
Yeah.
And I chose Cornell because, one, it was the best in the world, and I thought if I'm going to go master's and I'm going to pay out of pocket to do this, right, I want to have a phenomenal experience doing it. But what I liked about Cornell was that they also you had to pick a track. So my degree is a Master's of Management and Hospitality, but you had to pick a career focus. And my career focus was real estate finance and investments. So I could study real estate formally. So here I'd had all this on-the-job training, but I never knew the theory behind it. Why do we model cash flow this way? Why is this the right rate of return for an office building versus an industrial building versus a retail building? So I was able to study that formally, and that was fabulous. But then when I got out of Cornell, I thought, how am I going to marry these two together? To your point, how are you going to figure out how to take hospitality and real estate and put them together? So I moved to New York City, and I worked for JLL, which is a large commercial brokerage firm, in their hospitality division. So as a broker, I sold hotels in New York City.
Wow.
So that's how I was able to take hospitality and real estate and put it together.
So when you're selling hotels, I mean, you're bringing together investors, figuring out the numbers that make them work, and somehow marrying that in a process to make everybody win.
Yes.
That's like just a big version of having a buyer find the right house and figure out what their needs are, isn't it? I mean, because you're really just qualifying everyone's needs.
Together. Exactly.
So when did it, because you've been open for years now at Very Real Estate, and when did it click that you're saying, you know what, I'm going to do residential real estate and build a team around me and a culture around me where people are going to be open and curious and transparent and so on?
Yeah. So I think when you are working for someone else, and you see this all the time, so I'd love your thoughts on this.
Sure. Yeah.
When you're working for someone else, you want to see yourself in their role one day, right? Because it's natural career progression. You become your boss becomes their boss, that boss becomes the CEO one day, and then the CEO retires, right? So you're constantly moving up. And here I am working in New York City in commercial brokerage, which I'm so grateful I had that opportunity to do, because I think it toughened up my skin. There's very little now that riles me up, because I saw some terrible things when I was working in New York. It was basically everything you think of in commercial brokerage.
That was
right?
the culture.
The culture was...
like dog kind of?
Yeah, I mean, it was like a lot of... it was a huge brokerage shop, and we had an open floor plan, right? And there were all these different divisions. So you've got the hotel division, and you've got the financing division, and you've got the office guys, and you've got the retail people, et cetera. But people would always turn the papers over on their desk because they didn't want people in the same company to know what they were working on, because they would steal their client. And I thought, wow, I don't really know if this is me. I'm not sure I want to be my boss one day. I'm not sure that I always want to be looking over my shoulder to see that the guy next to me is, looking at my desk when I go for a meeting. And I thought, I'm not sure that this is really who I want to be when I get older. I'm not really sure that I want to broker these enormous deals. I looked to, mentor, people who are my bosses there, and I thought, I'm not sure that I can do business the way that they do business. Not that the way they did it was wrong. It was just different than the way I wanted to do business. And so I think it was that, and I laugh about this now, but I was 29 at the time, and I think it was like this crisis of turning 30 and being like, oh, what am I going to be when I grow up? Is this exactly who I'm going to be? And it was a combination of the two where I thought, I've got to get out of this, but what am I going to do for the rest of my career?
Yeah.
And so I was living in New York City. I was living in the East Village. I had this tiny little apartment. It was a one-bedroom, and I was paying well over $2,000 a month to live in this walk-up rental apartment. And I had bought a condo in Old City years previously, and I was renting that condo out. And it was a beautiful loft. I actually still own it. It's an investment property for me now, but I bought it in 2007, and I thought, I want to move back to Philadelphia. Step one is I want to move back to Philadelphia. But then I thought, well, what am I going to do? What will I do? So I had looked at my career, and I had experience in valuation. I had been on the buy side as an investor for Grosvenor. I had gone to grad school. I was on the sell side representing sellers in New York, selling hotels. And what I
You passed the real estate exam.
Yeah. I had a real estate license. Yeah. So I thought, you know what?
Funny.
What do I want to do for the rest of my career? And what I realized was that I love real estate. I had, at this point, been in it for 8 years. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. What I loved about real estate and still love about real estate is that every deal and every piece of property is different. And even if you're selling in a subdivision, two houses look the same. They're not the same.
Yeah.
It was just so unique. And I loved the value creation of real estate. And, you can take this house, for example, you can do XYZ things to it. You can create this value on the other side. So I loved real estate. I loved people. Obviously. I loved putting transactions together. So I thought, okay, well, what can I do with those three things that are really going to make me happy? And what I realized in my late 20s when I was working in New York and I was selling these, $100 million deals, I wasn't money motivated. It wasn't getting me out of bed anymore, what I was doing in New York. And it was like these huge deals would close, and I thought, all right, well, great, another one. And I thought, gosh, you're so unhappy. Why are you so unhappy? So what I realized was that I wasn't money motivated. I was motivated by helping people. I was happiest when I was helping people. So I thought, okay, I love real estate. I love people. I love putting people together. So I know I want to be somewhere in transactions. But that's when I made the switch to residential real estate. Because in commercial real estate, if you're lucky, you're buying more than one hotel in your life. But most people are not. And there's not that long-term relationship. And there's not that long-term, satisfaction, which I have every single day, of being able to help people with the largest purchase of their life.
Wow. So it's in a sense, in that culture, on the commercial side, it's results-driven, numbers-driven. I mean, you've got a finance, economic degree. However, there's a ballerina. I learned it before. There's a human side we could talk about to you, and that. I've interviewed the Wolf of Wall Street's one of his third guys in my life. I understand that culture, right? And that's not all Wall Street at all.
And there's nothing wrong with that culture, and I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that culture. I just didn't fit in that culture.
So maybe it's about awareness of
who I was.
Individual's...
I finally started to figure out who I was and what was going to get me out of bed, so to speak, every day. And it was this need to want to help people. So
that now, just looking from outside in, the understanding of the money and how important that is, when you do, your intention is for the customer, is for the client, could add an even more an even more valuable layer of competence and confidence to actually help residential, because you have so much experience and knowledge of the financial aspect, because it is one of the biggest
It is
purchases.
financial. At the end of the day, of course it is. There's so many numbers
Was that a
involved
blessing
in
in disguise in a sense
Probably.
then? To
I'm
have
sure
all that
it was.
experience there and then be able to bring that to residential?
Absolutely. And what's interesting too is that at the end of the day, like, the hospitality degree is exactly what I do every day. I provide an amazing experience for people buying a home, something that's memorable and lasting, something that makes them walk away from the closing table, which we happen to be sitting at right now, saying, you know what, I feel confident in my purchase. I feel like I was advocated for. I feel like Elizabeth or someone on her team really had my back. And now I'm going to tell 5 of my friends about that experience. And it's amazing to be able to take that hospitality background and apply it to residential sales and apply, all the finance that goes into that. It's a very different approach, and we love it.
Very home, it seems like, and purple reflects this, which I want to talk about, it. Concierge. You have this culture of a concierge. Like, people are focused professionals, which is that because, you were a focused professional one time in the sense of, like,
I still
why
very
focus?
much am.
Yeah. So, like, when you're, that thought process, that busy New York, for the clients here in Philly, they're busy with their lives. Wouldn't they want a realtor to take take the reins, be confident, let them, with their curiosity, know what's going on, communicate with them? Has that kind of meshed the way, like, you planned, I guess, all those years ago when you decided to start Very Home?
I think so. I mean, look, I didn't really have a plan when I started Very Real Estate. The plan was so funny. So I'm in New York City, and I put on my business school hat, and I was working for the commercial brokerage at the time, and I did write a business plan for the company. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs will agree, probably yourself included. You write a business plan, you launch, you put the business plan in a drawer, right? And then you find it like 4 years later, and you're like, oh, all right, so I did that, but I pivoted like happened. 6 times.
Yeah, it's real.
So I wish I could say I had this grand idea when I decided to do this. I did not. And so I'm in New York City. I made a plan. I considered coming and working for another brokerage in Philadelphia. I just wasn't sure. We had talked about this earlier. At the end of the day, people were going to buy me. Whether they liked me or not, they wouldn't care which brokerage name was on my card. Because of my experience, I could sit for the broker's license. I didn't have to be an agent. I could be a broker. So I thought, I'm going to be a one-person shop. I'm going to get my brokerage license, and I'm just going to start, and we'll see what happens. And that's what I did. And the next thing I knew, there were people who said, well, are you hiring agents? And I thought, yeah, I guess I could do that. I mean, I'm a broker. I can hold licenses, and I'd be happy to teach you because, again, I love to teach. I always lead with education. And so it started to kind of grow that way. And then it wasn't until about 1.5 years ago that I thought, okay, let me kind of define the culture of the company. I've had it in my head, but let me define it, and then let me only hire for culture.
Wow.
So I actually will not hire just because you're a great real estate agent, and that's wonderful. But if you don't fit with the collaborative nature of our team, it's not going to work. And I owe that to my team to find the right people who are going to recognize the need to help others.
What are some of the things that you look for to make sure that you are doing what's in best interest for someone that may be interested and also your company? Absolutely. What are some things that you look for in that?
Yeah, so we do, I told you we love education. So we have a learning session every Friday. We have a time slot. And of course, everybody on the team, with the exception, we have 3 W-2 employees. The rest are 1099. So of course, 1099, you can't tell people what to do, and you certainly wouldn't. So we have a meeting that's not mandatory, but everybody shows up for it. It's at 10 o'clock every Friday. It's a learning session. So either I will teach a lesson, or a lesson on, experience sharing, and the agents share as well. Or we'll bring in a guest speaker who wants to speak with them about mortgages or title or fill in the blank, anything. So when I'm hiring someone, I always encourage them to come to a learning session, because you can learn a lot and see how they interact with the rest of the team. So it's basically a way for the team to see, is this someone who's going to fit into our culture too?
Wow.
And I take that very, very seriously. I mean, I don't care if you come to me and you say, I have this huge book of business, I need to move my license, I want to work for you. Great, wonderful, because again, I'm not money motivated. I want to make sure that you're going to add value, not only to the clients that you have, but also to the team that you're joining. So that's just one example of the things that we do.
I got a million questions now. I love it. That's so rare and awesome.
Thank you.
It's like, well, our country started like years before 1776 when people got together and had meetings. So, I mean, lucky us to be able to do this later and off that, right? Like, thanks, guys.
Thank you. And we're so close to where that all happens.
Oh, yeah, that's even cooler for the culture. So, okay, now, because you were thinking, you're in New York, and you're thinking, is this who I want to be in the long run, like that culture? And the answer was no. So when you got into residential real estate, is the thought, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So who cares about the short game? I'm playing the long game.
Yep.
Does that give you more confidence to not be money motivated? Because I can align with that for sure. It's like, this is the long game. No one needs to get it.
Exactly.
For the first 10 years.
I share this with so many people when we talk about like money motivation, and people who relate to me and say like, "Oh, I'm motivated by helping people, and what should I do?" Because maybe sometimes I have to say no to business because it doesn't fit within my model or whatever. And I always say to them, like, look, you work in real estate, or you work in finance, or you work in whatever industry. Like, you're naturally going to make money if you follow your passion, I think. And I've been very fortunate in my career. Financially, I've been in a wonderful position. I'm very blessed. But I work hard for that. I work very hard for that, but I'm true to my core.
Your core beliefs.
Yeah, and so like an example would be when I first started the business, I defined a geographical area in which I was willing to work. And that area was Girard, the city, Girard to Washington Avenues, river to river. So it was the core 10 neighborhoods of Center City when I started in 2013. Now, we know Center City has exploded since then.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, I wanted to work in this geographical boundary. Why? Because I knew it. I knew it really well. I owned a home in Old City. I had lived in Rittenhouse Square. I had gone out in Fairmount. I knew those neighborhoods very well. And I wanted to build expertise within those neighborhoods. And so it was really hard when you first start, right? You're hungry. You need to get sales so that you can propel your business. You've got to build. But I would say no if the opportunity was outside of that rectangle.
Wow. Okay. So
talk about being like true to who you wanted to, defining yourself and being true to it. So let's say I had an opportunity, for example, on the main line.
Yeah.
I would work to find referral partners out there because I wasn't going to take on something I couldn't be an expert in. Because that was against
your character. Yeah. And it's like you. Okay, so just to backtrack, this is like gold. You knew certain areas, so that knowledge gave you confidence there. Yeah. And through that confidence, now you had to have a value system to live by, to stick by, your culture. Yeah. And you wouldn't break it. So you looked for ways to figure it out. And then that's where the referral came in. Is that something you really had to work on? Or has that been who you always have been in your life? Like being able to discipline yourself. I can speak for it. I was never that person. And then every day, Culture Matters is just me trying to work it out, man. Like, let's be real. Before this, I said, why you do the interviews? So I can listen. Yeah. We would never be cool 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I would have just, even with the cameras. Yeah. It's the Jay Show. I thought this was an interview. Well, I'd just keep talking. Yeah. So, see how easy it gets for me? Namaste, right? Was that something you worked on? Or have you been always able to discipline yourself in that regard?
I've been very good at self-discipline my whole life. So I shared with you earlier before the camera started rolling, I was a ballerina. I studied ballet as a little girl from age 3 all the way through high school, up to point. And I was So if you know anything about ballet, it's an extremely disciplined sport. I mean, you have to know the steps. It's in a different language. It's in French. Well,
I didn't know that.
It is, yeah. So each of the positions, everything that you're doing, every move is, one, in a different language, and two, it builds upon itself, right? So you can't do this move before you do this one, right? And you have to be a master at this before you can, like going on point, for example. When you go to see the ballet, if you see the ballet in Philadelphia.
I never have, but maybe after this.
The women and men too who stand on their toes, that's a different shoe than someone who's a early ballerina. And so in order to get to the point, it's called, you have to have mastered all these different, it's almost like karate in a way. If you try to do that
first,
you're going to break your ankle.
In trouble.
Because you have to build up the strength and you have to build up the positioning and the ability to do it.
And there's only one way to do it, to go from the beginning.
Another example would be karate, right? Like you have to start with the white belt and then whatever the next one is. I'm not an expert in karate, but then you eventually become a black belt. It's the same with being a ballerina. You have to take each individual step. So in order to master each step, you have to create discipline to practice. You have to be willing to take risks, right? Wow. All of these things. And so I think that discipline that I learned I don't think my parents, when they put me in ballet lessons when I was 3 years old, ever thought it was going to make any kind of difference. But I always think if I ever have a daughter, I'd love to see her get into ballet if that's something she's interested in, because it does teach you so many skills. So I've always been able to have self-discipline, which I think is what has helped me throughout my career.
So you have this discipline. You're not new in real estate, but newer back in the area in the residential, and you're keeping your focus on this area. What was the first 2 years like? How were you able to say no, I guess, to a lot of the people that approach you to be part of the company, or was that something that you learned later?
I learned that later.
Okay.
Yeah, I learned that later. Because again, I never defined who my ideal agent was, because I never thought I was going to build what I've built.
Yeah.
Right? I always thought, okay, well, I'll build my career in residential real estate. I want to help people. I'll have a great book of business. And I have been very fortunate that I have a great book of business. It's all word of mouth referral. I've built which is rare in the residential real estate space. I don't buy leads. I don't cold call. I've never had to do that. Now I've gotten to such a point where I am no longer really selling real estate. I'm transitioning as of April 1st, my entire book of business to my team.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a long time in the making. I found that I have the exact right team in place now to be able to do it, because I defined who that ideal agent was, and I created a culture and then hired to it. And that really, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, it's funny, I was having a conversation. Of course, when you're an entrepreneur, you have friends, you have many entrepreneurial friends. And I was having a conversation, I guess a year or so ago, with another woman who had started a business, completely different industry. She started 2 years before me, but we're the exact same age. And I looked at her one day and I said, if you know what you know now, would you have started your business then? And she said, I would not have. And I said, nor would I, because what I didn't know is what saved me, right?
Wow.
I figured it out along the way and was able to grow because, in spite of myself, right? Because I didn't know what I didn't know. I think I would have been too afraid had I had all the knowledge I have now 5 years ago. Does that make sense?
We're seeing... How long we got? Part 2 maybe? Yeah. So that's like a podcast. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, obviously it's the truth.
We met for the first time, maybe it was a year and change ago, at a group that meets fairly frequently it was actually one of the coolest groups I've ever been in, where people all shared innovative ideas, and shout out to Rob Wishnick who set this up for all this. And I was with Tom Bovey, yes, past client, great friend. And you were talking about a book that you were reading.
Okay.
Now, there's two things.
You have a great memory. I'm reading all the time. I read so many books.
It was about blogging and writing and putting out things. And there's two things. The mentors, we've talked about this, and the power of people that you've learned from, whether through osmosis or they've actually like taken you under your wing, or maybe like Abe Lincoln said, I learn from everyone I meet. Usually it's what not to do. I feel like you've learned a lot from that too, osmosis. You're at basically a mastermind, and you're talking about reading a book. So I'm like, you see where my head is going now? Exploding all over. Lots of learning. So I'm curious for the viewers, what are you reading now? What have you read in the last year that's really impacted you as a successful entrepreneur that is here 5 years in, and plus almost on the 6th year, you've delegated out to your team this huge step. 80% of businesses aren't in business within 5 years.
Yeah, I know.
So you're there, like, and coming from a corporate environment that you're kicking butt and like this megalith to come in here and bringing all that value. What are you reading? What are you reading now? What have you read in the last year that's propelled you?
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm reading now, I alternate usually between like a real estate or a business book and a work of fiction, just to kind of, because sometimes I think you really need to unwind. Right now, so my husband, so I just got married in January.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So my husband and I moved in together before we got married, but he loves to read too. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to start reading some of his books because we have this huge library between the two of us. Wow. What is he reading? So I'm currently reading one of his books. It's called A Nation of Wusses by Ed Rendell.
Oh, that sounds like another tape we got.
It's actually a great book. It's I'm 50 pages in, but it's the story of Ed Rendell. We're getting through how he was elected, how he became mayor, how he became governor. But what I think is cool about the book is that he calls it The Nation of Wusses because and it's a political book, but he's basically saying nobody actually, not nobody, I'm sure people do, but his whole premise is politicians particularly, they are just saying whatever they need to say to stay in office. And to be a true leader, you have to speak the truth and you have to stick with your values, which I resonate with
the values
so much. And so that's what I'm reading now.
Wow.
A book which I think, I can apply in a million different ways, and the stories are entertaining and enjoyable. What I read within the last year, a book that has super impacted me, it's called $1 Million Women by Julia Pimsleur. And you talk about the universe, or I talk about the universe. Each year, so let me tell you what $1 Million Women is. $1 Million Women is a book that was written by an entrepreneur, Julia, who had started a company where she did videos to teach children a foreign language. Okay, so that's what her company was. And it's so it's kind of a memoir, but also a guidebook, if you will. And the reason she wrote the book is because, I don't know if you know this stat, only 3% of women-owned businesses in the U.S. ever make $1 million or more of revenue a year.
Oh, wow.
Ever. And she wanted to change that. That was her mission, to change it. So she wrote this book on how she scaled her company to over $1 million a year of revenue, right? And now she's giving back as a result of this in writing the book, but now doing all of these, coaching and seminars, and she's doing a leadership summit next month in New York City, et cetera, et cetera. And I just thought this was so cool. And it's all about confidence for women and how that is such an important thing, women and men, in building a business. You have to feel...
Well, women are willing to talk about it. Men, it's not culturally acceptable yet.
Probably I don't know if that's true, but
that's just me saying that. That's my opinion.
So this book really resonated with me. And every year I do a vision board. Do you ever do them?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think my whole life's a vision.
Yeah, everything's a vision board. And on my vision board last year, when I read this book within the last 12 months, so on the vision board for 2018, had a picture of the book, okay? I got connected with the author, with Julia, through a mutual connection probably about a year ago. Right after I had read the book, I was talking about the book, and someone said, do you want to meet her? And I'm like, yeah. So that was so cool to me because it was the universe kind of coming back at you to say, like, you're going to scale your business. You're going to build it bigger and bigger. You're part of the 3%. Keep going and move on. And I just was so inspired by that.
So talking about that in the universe, I learned today when I came in, because this is crazy, but it's also the universe, I wore purple.
Yep.
I did
Good
not.
color on you, Jay. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel good. I feel better now.
Feel strong in purple. Yeah, purple.
I didn't know. For everyone watching this, this is one of your colors for your company.
Yep.
I prepared today by my normal process. LinkedIn, I want to look at the past of an individual so I can think less about what I want to ask and more listen So it's not crazy extensive. So I didn't know that purple was your color.
Yeah, purple is my color.
So
it's always
I am not
been my color.
a freaking genius today wearing purple. I do those things sometimes.
I wore purple because I knew I would be interviewed by you with
Which
culture.
makes sense for the culture.
And so I thought, well, company colors, yeah.
So the reason I'm like, my head's blown up about this is about 2 weeks ago, I realized all the ties I have and shirts, I tend to wear Pareto distribution, like 80-20. Like only a few of the ties, a few of the shirts. I take lots of pictures. I'm like consciously putting all the ties that I wear on one side of the closet so I actually use all the ties I have so I look different. And who would have knew that today purple was the color that came up.
Pretty good.
And then I looked it up before we did the film. I looked up purple and I learned a lot about it. It took 12,000 shellfish to make a toga
I didn't know
out of
any
purple
of
in
this.
1900 BC. No, listen, you got me on purple. And I'm just, to take a couple steps back, so I want to affirm that the universe, because on Google it said that purple
Google told me.
Yeah, Google told me. It's like what it means is about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because it's part of your company and your culture. The color purple can reflect one with self, one with the universe. Is that kind of where your thought was when you chose purple? It also said concierge. It said like royalty and dignity and wisdom and intelligence. So maybe just tell me why you chose purple before I keep talking about how excited I am.
No, it's funny. I wish I was that formulaic in choosing purple and gray as the company colors. I just always really liked the color purple. It has been my signature color since I was a kid. I don't know why. You know how like little girls, I have a niece who's 6. She vacillates every week between her favorite colors being pink or purple. And mine was always purple. So that's how I came up with the color. I mean, there was nothing scientific about it, but the name of the company, there was some science behind that.
What is that? Yeah.
So the company is Very Real Estate, and I was trying to figure out what to call this company that I didn't know I was going to build, when I was coming up with, okay, I'm going to get my brokerage license, I'm going to start an office, you have to name it. As part of the broker's license, you have to have a name. If it's not Elizabeth Convery, it has to be doing business as, right?
Yeah.
And my dad says to me, well, I mean, you should put your name into it. Like, what are you going to name it? And so one day I'm in New York City at the time, and I'm thinking like, well, what does my name actually mean? My last name is Convery, and con obviously means with. But I thought, what does very mean? We use very in every sentence. I mean, think of how many times a day, and now you'll start to think of it, that you use the word very. So I Googled it, of course, and there was a definition of very. And the definition is precise, true, and genuine. And I thought, that's the name of my company. Because I want to I knew I would build a brokerage. I just wasn't formulaic in how I would do it at that time. I want to build something that's precise, true, and genuine. And I want to be for my clients precise, true, and genuine. So I'm going to call the company Very Real Estate. And so I was down in Philadelphia visiting my parents, and I remember we were having coffee at DeBruno Brothers on 17th Street. And my dad said, did you figure out a name for this venture that you're doing? I said, I'm going to name it Very Real Estate. He goes, that's the stupidest name ever.
You just tell the truth, man. Like that's...
So I said, okay. He goes, well, why are you naming it after yourself? I mean, everybody's brokerage is named after themselves. I'm like, Dad, I did. And my mom got it immediately. My mom was like, that's really good. And you can use very in all your marketing, and very this and very that. And my dad was like, oh. And I said, do you think it's still stupid? He goes, no, I think it's going to work.
I believe, based on what I learned about purple today, you were supposed to call very, because purple means the universe. I'm telling you, got me on the purple.
That's perfect. So I didn't pick the color, but the name I definitely did a lot of research on.
The symbolism, it creates alignment, and you got it. Your culture matters.
Oh, for sure.
My last question to you is, let's say that we go back 5 years and 8 months before all the plans, before the team is developed, and every week people are learning and educating and growing. Everything that you've learned, all the books and mentors and results that you've gotten building this brokerage, what conversation would you have with yourself knowing what you learned today? What are you saying to yourself? You got a minute.
I would tell myself to not be as afraid. I would tell myself, you're going to be just fine, and just push and just go. Because I did all of those things, but I think I was scared more than I should have been along the way. That kind of fear of failure, like, well, what happens if I'm not well received? Or what happens if I don't get along with someone? Or what happens with this? And I navigated through all of that, but I think I would have grown much faster if I didn't have that bit of fear. But I think fear on the flip side is also a good thing, because I think that if you are so overzealous and you believe so much, you can make a lot of mistakes too. And so I think I have no regrets. I wouldn't do anything differently. I think my path is, I'm still way on it. I mean, we're such a baby of a company, 5 years old, in the grand scheme of what people build. So I wouldn't change anything, but eliminating that fear, and I've been able to do that going forward, is the best thing that I could have done. And I wish I had known that 5 years ago.
Thank you for being genuine and true today.
It was a pleasure.
This is amazing.
Thank you.
You're awesome, and your culture matters.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Jay.